everybody. This is pretty exciting to meet you all, and this is the wonder of the modern world, I suppose, is that we are all able to meet nationally. So I'm really grateful for this opportunity to talk about something that basically it's something that I just find really fascinating, and just will be sharing, I guess, my fascination with you, and as EALD teachers or TESOL teachers, I'm sure that we're all in together and finding languages and alphabets just so interesting. So let me just share my screen and I'll start the presentation. So, okay, so it's a bit of a funny story. When I was putting my presentation towards Marlene, and I originally had L1 non-alphabetic scripts, implications for EALD instruction, and then Marlene kind of showed me other flyers that other people had done, and they were much more exciting. So I tried to make it a little bit more interesting for you. It's like when alphabets collide. Okay, so yeah, Alison Seymour, and you've given all that information, the background information. I'm originally from New Zealand, have worked in Sydney and in Wollongong, and also briefly in Prague in TESOL EALD. So yeah, loving it. So today's presentation is just talking about alphabets and scripts, and how they lend themselves to a term called orthographic transparency, and I'll talk a bit more about that once we reach that point. And then thinking about the scripts and the transparency or otherwise of those scripts, how that impacts on students' acquisition of literacy in I say L2, but of course here we're talking about English, and then some strategies to assist students in developing their literacy. Now, I understand from Marlene that we've got people from across different sectors, from primary schools and high schools and adult education. So I've tried to make it fairly broad in terms of the kind of skills and where we can go with those. Because, depending on your cohort, you'll have quite different experiences, I suppose, in teaching them literacy skills. So just really briefly, I wanted to talk about why this topic was of such interest to me, how I got involved with it. And it really kind of started when I was working for the Intensive English Centre. And when I first started teaching there, I was working in learning support. And many of our students were actually originally from Myanmar or Burma. There's a growing community here in Wollongong. And I just became so fascinated with these students and what was demonstrated in terms of their ability to tune into the sounds of English, just extremely low phonemic awareness, and in my experience of teaching anyway, they seemed to have the most difficulty of students that I had encountered in tuning in, perceiving, but also producing consonant clusters, or combinations of consonants at the beginning and ends of words. So I embarked on a research project at the University of Wollongong, and in doing so just studied the syllable structures and phonology of Burmese, and also some other Southeast Asian languages as well. I would just like to invite you all that as we're going through and discussing different languages and different scripts, I'd be very open to others sharing their ideas and observations. I've studied a few languages, but I haven't actually studied an Asian language with a different script. So what I'm saying is just very academic, I guess, and from the readings that I've picked up and my experience in working with students. So first of all, I'll just invite you to unmute yourselves and just a very brief discussion. Where did the word alphabet come from?
No idea. I'm guessing it's alpha and beta from Greek.
Absolutely, yes. So thank you for that. Yeah, so the word alphabet in English has come from the two Greek symbols, alpha and beta, to form alphabet. And I think that's fairly commonly known, but when we're talking about different scripts, there's an interesting pattern. So I just thought I'd start with this question, and we'll see how it develops as we go through. So yeah, talking about the various types of scripts. I really like this infographic, which is just talking about the evolution of the Latin alphabet. And I say Latin rather than the English alphabet because, of course, there's a number of different languages that use the Latin script. So if you can see from the Proto-Sinaitic to the Phoenician, through Greek and Latin is how our Latin script has evolved today. But what I find particularly fascinating is that from the Phoenician alphabet, the Semitic alphabets were developed. So that's Arabic, Hebrew, and Aramaic. So I find it really fascinating that we have a common ancestor. Similarly with Greek, I actually only found out a few years ago that English or the Latin alphabet is descended from the Greek alphabet. So that's the Greek alphabets, but also from the Greek alphabets, Cyrillic, is that the way you pronounce it? Cyrillic or Kyrillic? So Bulgarian, Russian, Macedonian, all of these languages also originated from the Greek alphabet. So that's the Latin script. And then thinking about three major script types that exist in the world. So we're going to start with alphabetic. And the alphabetic script is where we have graphemes or letters which represent both vowels and consonants. And that's kind of a key indicator of what an alphabetic script is. And as we see, the Cyrillic alphabet and the Greek alphabet, they're representing both vowels and consonants. And that's kind of the major difference between other scripts, is how those letters or phonemes, graphemes represent the phonemes. So yeah, there's a direct correlation between sounds and symbols, which is known as phoneme-grapheme correspondence. So for example, the word bed has three sounds, the b, e, and d. And for those of you who may not have studied phonetics, just showing that the slashes there are a convention that's used with the International Phonetic Alphabet. So whenever you see the slashes, that means that inside the slashes, the symbols are actually representing the sounds, as opposed to the letters. You say the letters B, E, D, but the sounds are B, E, D, and the sounds are what we find inside those slashes. I'm going to be going through really quickly and throwing lots of information at you. So please, you know, if you have any questions, please put your hand up. And Marlene, you may be able to help me there because it can be a bit difficult to see all of the participants. So if you see that somebody's got a question or has put something in chat, you might like to interrupt, just let me know. So from the I guess, I'll call it pure alphabet, we go to a subset of alphabets, which is the consonant alphabets, also known as abjads. So these are the Semitic alphabets, where we've got Arabic, Hebrew, and Persian and Aramaic. And the major graphemes only represent consonants. Vowels or vowel sounds are represented with diacritics. So it's a very consonant-focused language. If you see in Persian, so that's an example of a little diacritic which indicates that there's a vowel or which vowel is represented there. And again, I can only talk about my experience with teaching Arabic speaking students, and you know, you may have experienced the same thing, that they can struggle to hear the internal vowel sounds. So particularly when they're short vowels. So that was always an area that we would focus on, is, you know, just trying to get them to tune into the short vowel sounds within words.
How did you do that?
Oh, well, we would just do some lots of minimal pairs, I suppose, you know, so bid, bad, bud, you know, or bingo, games like that, where they're tuning in on specific sounds that you're focusing on.
Okay.
Yeah, things like that. Yeah. Of course, we'll know that the directionality is different to English, so it's right to left. And while they do have some punctuation, it is less than in alphabetic scripts. I'm not sure, I don't know if there's any Arabic people who study Arabic. I don't think they have capital letters, but somebody might like to chime in on that. Okay, so yeah, like the word alphabet, the name Abjad is actually derived from the first 4 letters of the Arabic alphabet, which I found quite interesting. And when they're saying ABC, they actually say the words Abjad, Hawaz, Kuti. So yeah, that's where that name originated from for that particular type of consonant alphabet. Okay, and so moving on to the second major type of script, and this is a syllabary. And we're going to look first of all at the Japanese syllabary. So Japanese actually has a number of different scripts. You may or may not know that already. The hiragana script is where one particular symbol represents a syllable rather than an individual sound. So it could be a vowel syllable or it could be a consonant vowel syllable, but the symbol represents the full syllable. So because they're not actually visually related, we call them glyphs and not graphemes. So for example, if we were looking at the symbols for ka and ke in Japanese, the k sound, yeah, they don't have any similarity at all. So as a result, Japanese readers need to learn to memorize many different combinations and symbols. So they also have the kanji script, which is a pictographic script, and that's derived from Chinese characters. And this script is where it has a symbol to represent, say, an idea. So for example, man has got a symbol where it looks like somebody's standing. So those are the 2 different types of scripts that Japanese have. But yeah, in terms of representing a consonant and a vowel, it's quite a different written experience, I suppose. And traditionally read from top to bottom and from left to right. So the movement of the eye is quite different. I've been told that nowadays, sometimes rather than top to bottom, they are actually reading across the page. But traditionally, they've learned to read from in that particular direction using that directionality. And importantly, Japanese, it uses what we call syllable stressed timing, so that every syllable has equal weight. And we'll talk a bit about syllables later on, because it's obviously quite different to the way that English uses and pronounces and spells syllables. Okay, so the next type of script I wanted to talk about was the Abugida, and this is the Burmese type of script. And so again, it's quite a different relationship between the sounds and the symbols that are used. So like Japanese, they have one symbol which represents a single syllable. And again, like the Arabic or the Semitic alphabets, the consonant is represented. So the vowels are what they call implied or inherent. So if you had a syllable there, a syllable representation, unless otherwise specified, it has a vowel which automatically goes along with it. So when the vowel differs within the word, that's when they put the different diacritics. So it's like the default vowel, if you like. A consonant has a default vowel, and the way that they represent a different vowel is to change the diacritic. But the symbol's always the same for the consonant phoneme, so we call it a grapheme. So again, it's a consonant representation with the vowels being represented by diacritics. The next page shows, and like Abjad and alphabet, it's derived from the first 4 letters of the Ethiopian alphabet. So in this diagram here, the Davanagari script, this is a better indication of how that works. So you can see the pa on the left-hand side. That is the consonant with its inherent vowel. So the default vowel would be the ah sound. And then any changes to that are represented through diacritics. So you can see from pa to pa, from p to p, and also the addition of consonants on the bottom line there. And you can also see that those diacritics, they can be added to the right or to the left or underneath or on the top. So directionality of the consonants is quite different as well. So if you look at the top line and the third one above, which is P, the vowel is actually in front of the consonant. So again, you know, that's that whole idea of reading from right to left and sounding letters out as they go along. It's quite a different experience in an Abugida. As most of you would know, most Southeast Asian languages use predominantly open syllables. So they're ending in vowels. And so they have difficulties in hearing consonant clusters, particularly when they're at the end of words, and also producing them as well, because their articulators are not accustomed to combining the consonants together. So what I learnt about Burmese, which I just found absolutely fascinating, and helps to explain why they really struggled with word final consonant clusters, is that they only have 2 consonants nowadays which will end a CVC syllable. One is the glottal stop, and the glottal stop is the sound that is in the middle of the word bottle. So it's a kind of sound that's produced here at the glottis. Bottle is probably how it's best represented in English. So that's one of the sounds that can come at the end of a syllable. And the other is what they call placeless N or indeterminate N, which means that they know that they have to make a nasal sound. It doesn't really matter which nasal sound is made, but they will end, that they'll see a syllable which ends in a consonant, and regardless of how the consonant is written, it will end in some kind of nasal sound. So once again, you know, what's on the page in terms of consonants and is not necessarily how they would pronounce it. And so the representation on the page shows how words perhaps used to be pronounced, but they're not pronounced like that anymore, similarly to English, I suppose. But yeah, it's just interesting that the nasal sound doesn't really bear any resemblance at all to what's on the page. So that to me was, I guess, an explanation as why it was so difficult for Burmese students to hear the difference when there were lots of consonants at the end of a sentence, but also, you know, translating that from when they're reading to reading the words to pronouncing them and perceiving them.
Sorry, Alison.
Okay, so yeah, the relationship.
A question?
Sorry, what was that?
Sorry, can I ask a question? Am I allowed to interrupt?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, my name's Christy. Sorry. So with the Burmese, do you know if that's very similar then with Karen language, as Sagor Karen and other?
Oh,
yeah.
Thanks for that question, Christy. Yes, I should say Burmese languages because yes, they do all share that similarity. The Karen, the Kareni, the Wa. It's just a feature of that language family.
So yeah, from that language family. Okay, thank you.
No, thanks for reminding me of that. I should have said that. And so, yeah, just getting back to the relationship between phoneme and grapheme, the PGC, it's significantly different to English. And it's just really good to be aware of that, I guess, when we're working with these students. Okay, so just looking at these scripts, I'll just ask you what your observations are for what you see in how the scripts are laid out.
There's no spaces on the top one,
Mm-hmm.
the Burmese, so you can't see if there's individual words, can you?
Exactly, yeah. So spacing, yeah, there's one thing.
They both seem
One's
to be
much
aligned to the
rounder.
left. Sorry.
Go on, Zoe.
I was just going to say they both look like they're aligned to the left. I don't know whether that's a deliberate thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, actually, you're right. These scripts do have left to right directionality. Yep.
top one's a lot rounder, just in the look of it, one's rounder and the bottom one's a lot more angular.
Yes, yes. And it's got the lines across the top. Yeah. Great. Yeah, so these are some important differences. There's, first of all, directionality. As I understand it, there's no capitalization, and you picked up that there's few spaces between words and also few punctuation marks. So all of those cues that we rely on in English, yeah, they're just not part of the first language script. Thank you. All right. Moving on, and now talking about the third major type of script, which is known as morphosyllabic, and these are the Chinese languages. So here the symbol represents, again, a single syllable and a unit of meaning, or a morpheme. So I guess an idea is all incorporated within that symbol. So another word, and I do apologize for the way that the my scripts have gotten a little bit messy. When I uploaded it today, of course, all of the alphabets changed, which is kind of really ironic. So those are also known as logographs, where logo is, I believe, Greek for word, and graph is of course referring to the written representation. Okay. And as with Japanese, they're traditionally read from top to bottom and left to right. Okay, and this is just a representation, a broad representation of where they are geographically. Now, Marlene, I'm going to have to ask you if you could keep an eye on the time too. I don't.
Yes.
As I said, it's quite a long presentation, so I do apologise. I'm just throwing everything that I can at you, so you'll have to let me know when I'm getting close to moving.
Can I add a comment to that map?
Yes.
We've got one significant lack, and that is in your alphabetic, Vietnamese is actually alphabetic.
Actually, that's a really good point. Yes. And so, yeah, I could have put that. Yeah.
You know, on the whole, yes, they are the Abugida, but the ones stand out is because of colonization, and that's in Vietnam.
Right. Yes, yeah, and interestingly, Vietnamese uses as diacritics as well too. So they
yes, they do.
Yeah, they use those diacritics for pronunciation.
Okay, so that's what you'd call what I would call accents. You're calling them diacritics.
That's right. Yeah, I guess
okay.
You know, the two terms are interchangeable, really. I suppose. Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, thanks, Alvin. All right. So yeah, now I'd just like to talk briefly about orthographic transparency. And orthographic or orthography is a term for the written script, or for the written representation of sounds. And transparency really determines how easily it is to learn to read, or how easily we can read it once we know, I guess, the spelling rules. So it's that relationship of grapheme to phoneme that determines how easily it is acquired by first language speakers as well as second language speakers. And the kind of features that make up orthographic transparency, we've talked about phoneme grapheme correspondence. Also the complexity of syllables, you know, how many consonant clusters there are at the beginning and at the ends of syllables. And then, again, sorry about I'm a bit annoyed that all my words are not quite correct, but the morphological patterns. So how the root words, the suffixes, the prefixes, the inflections, how these all combine to make a meaningful word unit. All of these are determine how easy it is to learn in that language. And this is just that same information, just in a different kind of a graphic. Okay. So yeah, we've talked a lot about that relationship of sound and letter. And so now I would like you to engage in an activity, and we're going to do a breakout room here. So can I ask you to write down these 6 languages? And we're going to put you into a breakout room, and I'd like you to think, okay, which language here is the most transparent? and which language is the least transparent?
Alison, I'll put them into groups now.
Yeah, has everybody had enough time to write those down? So I'll just give you a couple of minutes just because, yeah, I've got a lot to get through. So maybe 2 or 3 minutes just to have that discussion. So thank you, Marlene.
I'll put you in pairs. Okay.
Great.
Okay, you should, are you all in pairs now?
I wouldn't have a clue where to find my pair.
No, just look on the screen.
That's
will
no,
be
true, Marlene.
What? Is it working or not?
I'm not sure
No.
if I've got a pair.
No.
Open all rooms. Hold on, maybe I've got to press it.
Yes.
Oh, yeah,
Yes,
we have to press.
yes, yes.
Okay, so we have to press join.
Right, yes.
It's the first time I've done this. So is everybody now in a pair? Bill?
So if you join, it'll, yeah, there they all go. See, Marlene, so they've all disappeared. So
So they have to press join themselves.
they do.
Okay.
So Lisa, have you got a pair? Or maybe you're my pair?
No, Lisa's with Crystal.
Oh, okay. So Lisa, you just need to click the button.
She mightn't be there. There's no green dot.
Okay, true, yes. All right.
Crystal, are you there? Oh,
No, you'd be able to see Crystal. So
now I can see Crystal, yes.
yeah, so that's how it works. They all just disappear, and then we will send them a little message saying come back, and they can all come back.
Oh.
So
Oh, sorry, Alison, can you just join the group with Sally? Can you just join?
okay,
You're
sure.
actually in one. Could you just press?
Okay, so do you know how to bring people out of breakout rooms?
No, I can press close. Okay. Shall we just a broadcast message to all?
In about 1 minute, you can broadcast
Okay.
come back in 1 minute.
Okay. You have 1 minute.
So Marlene, have you asked everybody to come back?
Yeah, now it says they're closing now.
Oh, great, fantastic.
Okay.
Put my screen back up again while we wait for
Oh, this is exciting, isn't it? My first breakout rooms.
I love breakout rooms and everybody just pops up. It's really cute.
Was it fun, Zoe? I can't hear you. Okay, we're going to start again now.
Yeah, that was good. Breakout rooms are good.
Oh,
Yeah.
good.
So shall we wait until everybody's back? I can't see how many people have come back.
I can't see either. Oh, they've got 14 seconds.
Okay, great. Lovely.
Okay.
We're back.
Excellent.
Okay,
Okay.
good.
So
We'll continue.
yeah, I'll throw it open. So what did everybody think was the most transparent language?
We thought Italian.
Yes, so did we.
Yeah, so did we.
Yeah, we did too.
Yeah,
We
why
did
did you
too.
choose Italian?
Yep, we were agreeing on that.
Why Italian?
based on that.
But it also looks as it sounds. You know,
Yes,
there's no
it
like
sounds
hidden meanings or anything.
And most transparent? I mean, sorry, the least transparent.
We thought
Chinese.
Chinese, Hindi, we weren't sure, one of those.
I even thought English.
Yeah.
We thought English.
Well,
Yeah, we put English pretty down the bottom there.
all right. So let's have a look. Yeah, and so according to studies that have been done in terms of readability and that transparency kind of, whoops, oh, okay, so it should automatically do that. And it's not. Okay, so what I'll have to tell you, the most transparent is Portuguese.
Okay.
Yeah, then Italian, and then French. Yeah, those are the interestingly the three Romance languages. Is English, and English is actually quite an opaque language simply because of all of those different vowel combinations that we have. But I meant to check the exact percentage. It's actually got quite a high percentage of phoneme graphing correspondence, something like about 70%. But the remaining 30%, there's just so many combinations, I suppose, that makes it quite opaque and difficult when people are trying to learn to read it. Then after that is the Abugida, Hindi, because there is still some relationship to consonants, to the sound and the letter on the symbol on the page. And then, of course, Chinese is the most opaque because there's no relationship whatsoever to sound. It's all about meaning and memorization. Yes.
I'm surprised that French is okay because of, with the plurals. The S at the end, you may pronounce it, you may not, and that strikes me in many cases. And you have a lot of words that have the same sound but totally different spellings.
Yeah,
I'm surprised.
Yeah, the overall though, the rules of pronunciation are more regular for French than they are in English. So maybe as English speakers learning French, we find that challenging. But internationally, in the studies that have been made, yeah, the phoneme graphing correspondence is more transparent in French than English. So, yeah.
There you go.
Okay.
Oh, well,
Good.
yeah, in a way that makes sense because English has so many languages it derives from.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we haven't even got there. That's another area that I'm absolutely fascinated by, but no time for that today. So
Alison, it's nearly 5:10.
10 past.
And I'm just going to mute everybody. So if you want to speak, you'll have to unmute yourself.
All right.
Oh, I've muted Alison. Sorry.
All right.
Okay. Hold on. I've muted you. Alison, hold on.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sorry.
Yeah, because I'm sharing my screen, I can't find my face to unmute myself. So
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
No, that's all right.
Okay.
So that's Zoom for you. Okay. So yeah, thinking about the aspects that have that impact on the acquisition of literacy, and we'll say literacy in English. What language aspects do differ, and we've looked at things like directionality. I think we probably won't open it up to the whiteboard just because we're starting to run out of time. But maybe if you can just give some answers that you might have, you know, so we've talked about directionality, left to right, right to left. What other aspects of the scripts are different?
I think the lack of capitalization in some of those languages. I'm thinking of a student whose first language is Korean and capitals, and suddenly going, oh, that suddenly makes sense that the capitals are erratic.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
The whole vowel consonant consonant clusters at ends of words.
Yes, definitely. All right, so here I've got a list of the language features. So there's the transparency that we've talked about, syllable structures, whether they're open or closed, how many syllables at the beginning and end of each consonants at the end of each syllable, and whether it's syllable timed or stress timed, how vowels and consonants are represented. And as we can see, many scripts around the world favour the consonants, and vowels are just implied. And yeah, you mentioned the capitalisation and punctuation. Absolutely. We've looked at directionality, vertical, horizontal, left to right, right to left. And then the symbols themselves. Are we using letters which represent sounds, or are we using symbols or pictures or characters? So all of these language features obviously have a huge impact on, you know, these poor students trying to learn how to read English. Yep, so that phoneme graphing correspondence is much less relevant in many languages, and as a result, many of them, say Japanese and Chinese, they just learn through memorization. So phonics, where you're sounding out letters, it doesn't exist at all. So this is something that even for your, you know, teenage students or your adult students, when they're encountering new words, they can really struggle with that. So, you know, you can encourage them to sound the letters and the words out. So now I'd just like to go through some strategies that I have used, and referring to Luke and Peabody's 4 resources of a reader model, where we've got code breakers, text users, meaning makers, and then analysts of text. Now, if you can't break the code, then it makes those other roles particularly difficult. So EALD students in particular, if you're going to work on kind of phonics or building phonemic awareness, those activities do need to be contextualized to help them make meaning. So phonemic and morphological awareness are 2 aspects that are really useful to focus in on when you're trying to assist these students with the acquisition of reading. They're also known as bottom-up strategies, as opposed to whole text, or, you know, kind of looking at the whole text, because it's looking at the individual sounds and syllables and looking at words from the smallest component. So phonemic awareness, what is it? It's been called the leading predictor of children's future ability to learn to read fluently and successfully. And this is the ability to focus on, to hear and manipulate phonemes in spoken words. If you can hear them, you can recognize them, you can more easily read and write them. And morphological awareness is the ability to identify and use units of meaning within words or sentences. So I mentioned briefly root words, suffixes and prefixes, but also things like plural S and ES, the past tense ED, which as many of you would know, has 3 different pronunciations depending on the consonants or the word, the root word, and the use of ing. So just bringing students' attention intentionally in your teaching program is particularly useful. And yeah, I'm sorry, we're probably running out of time, but if I'm going to go through some strategies, please, I'll ask you to chime in perhaps with comments on the strategies, if there's something that you use. So first of all, yeah, our little cartoon. Absolutely true. Phonetic does not look the way that it sounds. However, English used to be much more transparent. So up until the 14th century and around about the time of Chaucer, silent letters were pronounced and vowels were much more consistent. So what you read on the page was sounded much more like what it looked like than it does today. Which is why if you've ever heard people speaking in Middle English, it sounds completely different. So one of the strategies that I used to use just to increase that letter sound knowledge and kind of meta-linguistic understanding of English was I would get students to pronounce the silent letters in a way of internalizing them. So I would tell them it used to be pronounced Kanifi or Kano or Kalimba. And so just by them saying it as they read it and perhaps as they wrote it, it was just a way to internalize that. And then of course we would then go through and pronounce it without the actual, pronounce it correctly. Caught and bought, one way to really emphasize that GH sound is to pronounce it the way it used to be pronounced, which was with the H sound. So it used to be, caught would be something like kaucht and baucht. And just by doing that, students, they actually really enjoyed that activity because they may have encountered these words and thought, wow, that's just really weird. So it's something that makes sense. And just by pronouncing those sounds, it helps them to internalize the spelling. Just very briefly about what's a linguistic term, segmentals and suprasegmentals. So segmentals are the individual sounds within words. So that's the phonemes and the syllables. And what we call suprasegmentals are the larger units. They're words, they're what happens when we have phrases and clauses when we're pronouncing it, pronouncing these things. Just as a very quick aside, and I'd love to go into this in more detail, but if you're teaching pronunciation, teaching students about intonation across a number of words or in running words together, so looking beyond the individual sounds, but looking at the words in context of a sentence, does definitely produce a more natural type of phrasing. And thinking about, you know, what the pitch, how long you hold the phoneme for, the volume. I should have had volume in there as well, because with our stressed and unstressed syllables in English, the stressed syllable usually has a higher pitch. It has a longer length, but it also is pronounced at a higher volume than the unstressed syllables. And this is something that needs to be explicitly taught to a lot of students from Southeast Asia. So again, another strategy that we've used successfully at the Intensive English Centre is a multisensory kind of approach, where you count the syllables on your fingers and arms. So for example, I don't know if you can see me, but I've put it into the PowerPoint. So you go animal, animal. So tapping your arm, animal, and then putting it across for the whole word animal. Because often students don't hear that difference in syllables because they're so used, or some languages are so used to saying the same sound, saying the same syllable stress. They can't hear unstressed syllables particularly well. So the combination of hearing, of movement, physical movement, and also the visual is being proven to be a good aid to consolidate that learning and just develop that awareness of sounds and syllables. So yeah, you can use this perhaps in high schools if you're introducing vocabulary, and you know, this, as you all would know, if you're not working in a TasTesol specific context, then the kind of strategies that you use for ELD students are really useful for your lower literacy students as well. And yeah, this kind of thing, it can help them with learning, you know, complex multi-morphemic words that we have in KLAs. For example, with a lot of the Greco-Latin vocabulary, some other things that you can do is look at the similarities, look for the common roots, break down the word components. So looking for that root within the multi-syllabic word, and then just exploring that to help them make meaning. Again, for distinguishing segmentals and phonemes. And I use this a lot with the Burmese students. And I noticed that often it was when there was a TS sound at the end of a word, they really struggled with that. There's a lot of meaningful information that comes at the end of English words, such as plurals and past tense. So really helping the students to kind of key into that was a useful thing to do. So can you see me? See my face? So what I would do for, say, something like cats, I would go cats, cats, and get them to do the same thing. And that was a really successful strategy, just to get them to kind of be able to pronounce and hear those different sounds at the end there. So it sounds simple, but yeah, it's just something that really worked. You'll get a copy of this, something you might like to practice. Same with the jumped. And I haven't used the ED form where we add the extra syllable, but you go jumped, walked, played. And it's just that, again, multisensory sound, vision, and movement that just helps for them to internalize these sounds or to develop their awareness. Suprasegmentals, things like intonation and vowel reduction, vowel deletion. I could talk a lot about that today, but we just don't have time. I just now wanted to show you some activities that I used for looking at the different stresses in English, so syllable stress and word stress. So if you're old and grey like me, you probably would have used Cuisenaire rods when you were at school for your maths. And one of the first courses that I did as a TESOL teacher was a pronunciation course, and they showed me some of these strategies to use with Cuisenaire rods. So I really wanted to share them with you. So looking at word stress, so as you know, the syllable stress can change the same word depending on whether it's a verb or a noun, and Cuisenaire rods were just one way to really make that quite explicit. So for example, here we've got record, where the yellow Cuisenaire rod represents that longer syllable, and then record for the noun. And so, you know, just giving students a list of words that they could then play around with and really try to hear and feel that difference, because often they just cannot feel it because it's so different. Some other noun verb combinations, the word import, permit, can be permit or permit, conflict, conflicted, contest, contest. So that's a nice little activity to do with your students. And then looking at how a root word changes the stress depending on the addition of morphemes. So for the word photo, the stress is on the first syllable, 2 syllables, but then when you add extra morphemes to make it photography, now a 4-syllable word, and the stress has shifted to the 2nd syllable, so photography. And then again, looking at another representation or another version, when you add the IC, the ick at the end, photographic, it then changes to the 3rd syllable. And you might be teaching Shakespeare in your high school classes, the old iambic pentameter. These, you know, can work for mainstream students as well. So looking at sentence stress and poetry. So, shall I compare the two a summer's day? You know, just little ideas there that are just another way to kind of make these aspects much more visible to them. Any questions so far? Okay. If you're talking about stress, you can't really go past the vowel schwa, and sadly I just don't have a lot of time to get into this if you didn't know about schwa, but it's the most commonly used vowel in English, and it is often the vowel sound in unstressed syllables. So just going back to, say, photography. So in photo, you've got the full O sound, photo. But when you change to photography, then that first syllable becomes the schwa, the unstressed sound, photography. So it's a really useful concept to tell students as just to understand how the letter may look the same, but it sounds quite different depending on its place, you know, on what's happening within the context of the word. And now just briefly touching on morphological awareness, because we're running out of time. So I think phonics has long been recognised as you know, developing that sense of sounds and letters. But in I guess the last 10 to 15 years, the introduction of, well, not the introduction, but the recognition that morphology and morphological awareness is quite a powerful way to assist students. So this is, you know, really getting inside the words and pulling them apart, and getting them to recognise these morphemes in different contexts can really help with making meaning. So what that might look like, your past and present progressives, your ings. These are some of the first morphologically complex words that children learn to spell, both as first language speakers and second language speakers. And, you know, just really focusing in on how the words change with these additions of the ing or the plurals and the eds will help them with their morphological awareness when they're using words that are more complex. So this is a really nice tool that you've got the website there. And so you can actually create little word matrices online and then work with your students to pull these words apart. So, you know, from joy, you can create all these different words. And with the word matrice or word matrix, you can use word webs. And then this, you know, really gets them inside that word and helps them to deconstruct perhaps the longer words which have got, you know, unhelpfulness, you know, that's 4 different morphemes there. So in the resources that I'm sharing with you that Marlene will make available on the website, there's links to all of these tools that you can use online. Also, you can do a word search. And what I might do, I'll just show you what that looks like. So I'm going to the word searcher. Can you all see the word search?
Yep.
Yep, okay, great. So for example, here I just typed in rupt, which is, you know, a morpheme that depending on what you're teaching, you might think, okay, you know, I'm going to explore this in more detail. You press go, and then it comes up with all of this list here, and you can see erupt, abrupt, erupts, corrupt, all the different words that contain rupt. And you can do activities, you know, just to explore, okay, what does that actually, what's the inner meaning, I suppose, of rupt? And it all has, in this case, it all has a connection to do with something breaking, erupting, corrupting, bankrupting. So yeah, the word searcher can give you some interesting things to explore. And so from the word searcher, you can build word webs where you look at the different combinations. But yeah, all of that is in the resources that I have provided for you. I've also got a reading that I'd like to share with you that I thought was particularly fantastic. It's called Contextually Relevant Word Study, where it just lists a number of different strategies for breaking down words and you know, doing some great word studies. So it's highlighting the Greek and Latin roots. It's linking those shared meanings, just as we saw with rupt. So if you look at recede, precede, succeed, exceed. So, you know, introducing them to the idea that there are relationships across all of these words. So once they have an idea of a word in one context, then that can actually transfer across to different contexts. It's got ideas for using prefixes and suffixes, which really contains so much meaning. And if students can learn some of the really common prefixes, such as the use of the letter I, like in impossible, irreplaceable, in imperfect, the IMs, the INs, the IRs, they all have the same kind of root, meaning it's like the opposite of what the word is to come. So yeah, just kind of getting in and working from the words from the inside out is very helpful for students. Okay, back to the presentation. Yeah, so we've actually come to the end, so I've timed it well. one minute over. So I have created a couple of resources which you can link to if you've got the PowerPoint. I've got links to these documents in there, and from each of the documents that will link to further resources for you. So that is the end of the presentation. Thank you so much for your time. It's been lovely to talk at you.
Can I just say thank you, Alison? That was so interesting, and it's inspired me to think about when I'm putting together like a learning plan or a profile on a student with EALD, to actually look at their first language and think about what are the likely challenges they're going to have that all of their teachers can be aware of. So it's not just, oh, so-and-so can never get their spelling right. It's, well, this is actually inherent in their first language knowledge, and here's some strategy to support it. So that was brilliant. Thank you so much. And just the refresher course on linguistics, which was a love of mine. Brilliant.
Great. Thank you.